When dialing, notice that I brought my finger around until it firmly touched the finger's stop. And now I remove my finger.
You used to be able to pick up something in your house and hear the whole world on the other end of it. You'd lift the handset off the cradle, hear that low, steady hum that meant the line was open, stick your finger into the 7, pull it all the way to the metal stop, and let go. And while that dial clicked its way back, you had a second to think about what you were going to say. Then the 6, then the 3. Each number, a tiny mechanical event, a gear turning, a spring releasing, a pulse traveling down a copper wire that ran from your kitchen wall to a pole on your street to a switching station downtown, and then out into the world to find the one person you were trying to reach. No screen, no menu, no password, just your finger, a rotating wheel, and the sound of a machine doing exactly what it was built to do. That was the rotary phone. There were 93 million of them, and the sound they made is gone from the earth. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You remember where it sat, not just the phone, but the spot in the house where it lived. Because it only lived in one spot, and that spot never changed. The kitchen wall, probably, or the hallway on that little telephone table your mother picked out. The one with the shallow drawer for the phone book and the small shelf underneath, and the notepad with a pen on a string. That table existed for one reason: it held the phone. And next to it, a chair or a stool or nothing at all, which meant you stood there in the hallway while you talked, leaning against the wall, twisting the coiled cord around your finger while your father walked past and gave you that look that meant wrap it up. The cord was everything. That spiral of rubber-coated wire connecting the handset to the base, and if you were lucky, it was the long one. The one that stretched far enough to let you drag the handset around the corner into the bathroom or the closet where nobody could hear you, and you would sit on the floor in the dark, whispering to your best friend about something that felt like the most important thing in the world at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. The cord always tangled. It curled in on itself like a vine, and you would hold the handset in the air and let it spin until it unwound, and then within a day it was tangled again, and you just accepted that because that was how cords worked, and nobody questioned it. The sounds were different then. Everything about a phone call had a sound, and every sound meant something. The dial tone meant the line was open. The rotary click, that rhythmic ticking as the dial spun back, meant a number was being sent. The ring was not a ringtone. It was two actual metal bells inside the phone, struck alternately by a small hammer powered by 90 volts of alternating current sent from the telephone company, and it was loud and it was real. When that phone rang at 6 in the morning, the whole house heard it and everyone froze. Because a phone call at 6 in the morning meant something. It meant news, good or bad, and it meant someone had something to tell you that could not wait. And then there was the busy signal. That flat, repeating tone told you the person you were calling was already on the phone, and there was nothing you could do about it. No voicemail, no callback, no leaving a message after the beep. Just busy, hang up, try again in 10 minutes, try again in 20. Try again after dinner, and if they were a teenager with a best friend on the other end, you might not get through until tomorrow. The phone in your house wasn't yours. That's something most people have forgotten. If you were a Bell System customer, and 80% of America was, the telephone on your wall or your table was the property of the telephone company. It said so right on the bottom, property of New York Telephone, or Pacific Bell, or Southwestern Bell, not for sale. You paid a monthly rental fee for the privilege of having it in your home, and in return, if it ever broke, a man from the telephone company came to your house and fixed it for free. He wore a uniform. He carried a leather tool bag. He knew your phone by model number, and he could take the whole thing apart on your kitchen counter and put it back together in 15 minutes. He was a bellman, and that meant something. That phone was built by Western Electric in a factory in the United States, and it was designed to last 40 years, and most of them did. The Model 500. Black, heavy, indestructible. You could drop it down a flight of stairs and pick it up and hear a dial tone. You could slam the handset down in anger 1,000 times and it never cracked. Children stood on them to reach the cookie jar. They survived floods and house fires and moves across the country, packed in a box with no padding, and they just kept working because that was what they were made to do. The man who designed it was named Henry Dreyfuss, an industrial designer from New York who believed that the shape of an object should fit the shape of a human being using it. He studied hands and ears and shoulders and the angle at which a person holds a receiver against their head, and he designed the Model 500 so that the handset was flatter than the one before it, lighter, easier to cradle between your ear and your shoulder so you could talk and cook at the same time, or talk and fold laundry, or talk and do absolutely nothing while you stared out the kitchen window at the backyard and listened to your sister in Ohio tell you about her kids. Dreyfuss did not just design a phone. He designed the posture of an entire generation of women leaning against kitchen counters with the phone tucked under their chin and both hands free. The phone came in black at first, and then in 1953 they added colors, and suddenly your telephone could match your kitchen. Harvest gold, avocado green, princess pink, powder blue. The coiled cord was introduced that same year, replacing the old straight one, and it became so iconic that 40 years later people would still recognize the shape of it in a photograph and feel something in their chest they could not quite name. But before any of that, before the colors and the cords and the Model 500, there was a man in Kansas with a problem nobody else would have thought to solve. In the 1880s, Strowger was an undertaker in Topeka. The story goes that he kept losing business to a competing funeral home, and he could not figure out why. Families who should have been calling him were calling his competitor instead. Then he learned, or at least believed, that the local telephone operator was connected to the other funeral home and was quietly directing calls away from Strowger and toward his rival. Whether that was true or not, it set Strowger on a mission. He decided that the only way to guarantee a fair phone call was to remove the human being in the middle. So he built a machine, an automatic switching system that let a caller connect directly to another phone without going through an operator. He filed his patent in 1891. The first commercial installation went into service in LaPorte, Indiana in 1892. It took the Bell system another 27 years to install its first rotary dial phones in Norfolk, Virginia in 1919, and it took until 1978 for the very last town in America, Avalon on Catalina Island off the coast of California, to finally convert from a live operator system to dial service. The entire 20th century, almost the entire thing, was the story of America learning how to dial its own phone calls. And it all started because a funeral director in Kansas did not trust the woman at the switchboard. The telephone exchange was its own kind of poetry. Before they gave you numbers, they gave you names. Your phone number did not start with digits. It started with a word. Pennsylvania 65000, Murray Hill 59975, Butterfield 8, Klondike 5. The first two letters of the word corresponded to the first two digits on the dial, and the rest were numbers, but what you remembered was the name. Pennsylvania meant you were calling Midtown Manhattan. Murray Hill meant the East Side. Chelsea meant the West 20s. Hollywood meant Los Angeles. The name told you where in the world you were reaching, and it felt like something. It felt like the phone system had a sense of place. Glenn Miller wrote a song called Pennsylvania 65000, and it became one of the most famous recordings of the swing era. Elizabeth Taylor starred in a film called Butterfield 8. The Ricardos on I Love Lucy had a Murray Hill number, and everyone watching knew exactly what that meant. And then in the late 1950s, the phone company decided that names were inefficient. They started converting to all-number dialing, just digits. No more Pennsylvania, no more Klondike, no more Gramercy or Tremont or Yukon. In San Francisco, a group of citizens formed the Anti-Digit Dialing League to fight the change. Nationally, the Committee of 10 Million to oppose all number calling gathered signatures and filed protests. They lost. New York held out until 1978. Philadelphia had named exchanges in the phone book as late as 1983. But eventually, everywhere, the names were gone, replaced by numbers that meant nothing, sounded like nothing, and told you nothing about where in the world you were calling. And then there were the party lines. If you grew up in a small town or a rural area in the 1940s, the 1950s, or even the 1960s, you probably shared your phone line with your neighbors. In 1950, 75% of residential Bell system customers were on party lines. That meant 2 families, 4 families, sometimes 10 or 20 families, all connected to the same wire. Each household had its own ring pattern. 2 short rings meant the Johnsons. 1 long and 1 short meant the Petersons. You learned your ring the way you learned your address, and when the phone rang with someone else's pattern, you were supposed to ignore it. But you did not always ignore it, did you? You picked up the receiver very gently, covered the mouthpiece with your hand so they would not hear you breathing, and you listened. Everybody did it. Everybody denied it. The whole town knew everything about everybody, and nobody could prove how. Before television was widespread, before the internet existed, before social media, the party line was the original social network. Except you could not unfollow anyone. And if your neighbor's teenage daughter spent 2 hours on the phone with her boyfriend every night, you could not make a single call until she hung up. There were rules. The phone company ran advertisements and produced films about party line etiquette. Keep calls under 5 minutes. Hang up immediately if someone needs the line for an emergency. Do not be a phone hog. But people were phone hogs, tempers flared, and there are documented cases of houses catching fire because someone refused to get off the line when a neighbor needed to call the fire department. By 1965, only 27% of customers were still on party lines. By the mid-1980s, about 4.5 million subscribers remained. By the turn of the millennium, roughly 5,000 people in the entire United States were still sharing a telephone line with their neighbors. Now it is 0. The party line is as gone as the horse and buggy. The beginning of the end for the rotary dial came in 1963 when the Bell system introduced the touchtone phone to the public. Push buttons instead of a dial, faster, cleaner, compatible with the electronic switching systems that were replacing the old mechanical exchanges. The touch-tone phone did not make the rotary phone obsolete overnight. Millions of them stayed in service for decades because they still worked and because the people who used them saw no reason to change. But as automated phone systems spread through businesses, government offices, banks, and airlines, the rotary phone became a problem. Press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, press 0 to speak to an operator. You could not press anything on a rotary phone. You could only dial, and the systems did not understand dials anymore. That was the quiet way the rotary phone was pushed out, not by a better product, by a world that stopped speaking its language. Then came January 1st, 1984, the day the Bell system ended. The federal government, after a decade-long antitrust case, forced AT&T to break itself into 7 regional companies, the Baby Bells. For the first time in American history, you could own your own telephone. You could walk into a store, buy a phone for $10, plug it into your wall jack, and use it. No rental fee, no bellman, no monthly charge for equipment. It sounded like freedom, and in some ways it was. But the phones you could buy in a store were not Model 500s. They were cheap, plastic, light as a toy, made overseas. They broke if you dropped them once. The handset felt hollow. The buttons stuck. The sound quality was thin and tinny compared to the warm, full tone of a Western electric instrument. The 40-year phone was replaced by the 2-year phone, and then the two-year phone was replaced by the cordless phone, and the cordless phone was replaced by the cell phone, and the cell phone was replaced by the smartphone. Somewhere along the way, the thing in your pocket stopped being a telephone at all. It became a camera, a calculator, a map, a television, a music player, a wallet, a flashlight, and occasionally, reluctantly, a device you use to call someone, though you almost never do because you text instead. In 2001, 97% of American households had a landline telephone. That was the peak. It was also the last time the old world was fully intact. By 2010, there were more cell phones in the United States than landline phones. By 2017, for the first time, more than half of American households had no landline at all. By 2022, 72% of American adults relied solely on a wireless phone. Less than 30% of households still had a landline. The people who kept them were mostly over 65, mostly homeowners, and mostly in the Northeast, where the old ways held on longest. In New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, and New Jersey, more than half of adults still lived in a house with a landline. Everywhere else, the cord had been cut. 93 million Model 500 phones were built between 1949 and 1984. 161 million Dreyfuss-designed telephone sets in total. The Bell system at its peak had $150 billion in assets and employed over 1 million people. One company connected almost every home in America to every other home in America through a network of copper wire, mechanical switches, human operators, rotary dials, and real metal bells that rang so loud the neighbors could hear them through the walls. All of it gone. The company, the network, the equipment, the repairman, the dial tone, the busy signal, the operator saying number please, the party line, the exchange names, the telephone table in the hallway, the coiled cord, the kitchen phone, the whole system, the whole way of talking to each other, replaced by a glass rectangle in your pocket that does 1,000 things, weighs 4 ounces, connects you to 8 billion people, and somehow makes you feel more alone than that single black phone on the kitchen wall ever did. You remember the weight of it, the handset in your hand, heavy and solid and warm from the last person who held it. You remember the click of the cradle when you hung up, that definitive mechanical sound that meant the conversation was over. You remember dialing your grandmother's number from memory, every digit, because you had dialed it 100 times, and your finger knew the way around that wheel the same way your feet knew the way to her front door. You remember calling your best friend after school and talking for an hour about nothing while your mom yelled from the other room that she needed the phone? You remember the night the phone rang at 3 in the morning and your father got up and answered it in the dark, and you lay in bed listening to his voice through the wall, and you could tell by the way he said hello whether the news was good or bad before he said another word. That sound, his voice on that phone in the hallway in the middle of the night, you can still hear it. 147 years ago, Alexander Graham Bell spoke into a crude wooden device and said, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." That sentence traveled a few feet through a wire to the next room. By the middle of the 20th century, that same invention, refined and perfected and mass-produced, sat on a table in nearly every home in America, connecting a nation of 200 million people to each other through a web of copper and sound. The phone company gave it to you. A man came to your house and installed it. Another man came and fixed it when it broke. You dialed your number and waited and listened and talked and hung up, and the whole thing cost you a few dollars a month. It was simple. It was reliable. It was permanent. It was the one piece of technology in your house that never changed, never updated, never needed a password, never ran out of battery, and never once asked you to agree to terms and conditions. If you ever stretched that coiled cord as far as it would go and whispered into the phone in the dark, if you ever dialed a number so many times you could do it with your eyes closed, if you ever heard those 2 metal bells ring in an empty house and ran to answer it before whoever it was hung up, Tell me about it. What color was your phone? What was your number? I read every single one.
Remove my finger and let the dial go back by itself.